Okay, our next speaker is someone I'm proud to call my friend, someone who served as an openly gay member of the Dallas City Council, first being elected in 2001. He was re-elected twice, so he served 3 terms before he ran for mayor. And at that point, he was one of the sort of trailblazers in being an openly gay candidate for mayor of a city as large as Dallas. It's happened a few times since then, but he was one of the first that did it. And it was a crowded field. I've just forgotten how 11, good gosh, 11. No wonder we had to work so hard on that damn race. 11 candidates, and the top 2, of course, wound up in a runoff, and Ed was one of those top 2. And our community worked very hard to get him elected, and he worked very hard and ran a phenomenal campaign, and we damn near did it, but we didn't quite win. But he really raised the bar for future candidates, and he did such a phenomenal job serving our community for all the years he was on the council. He was one of our strong allies, along with a number of others who helped us pass some of the very important GLBT non-discrimination ordinances that the Dallas City Council passed, and I just can't say enough good about him. I love him, I appreciate him, I'm so thankful for what he's done for our community. So without further ado, Mr. Ed Oakley.
Well, unlike Loopy, I was told to stand right here and not move, so I guess I'll try to abide by that. Well, I see George and Jack sitting down here on the front row. You know this isn't a drag show. You know, they show up at every event to steal the tips, and that's the reason they're sitting here. They think there's going to be a drag show. They did. Loopy let me out for the night. Well, I'm very honored to be here tonight. And share this. They've asked me in the past, and most of you know I travel a lot now that I'm done with politics. I saw Bruce Jester at the post office the other day, and I was kind of talking about what I was going to say, and he said, well, we want you to make it personal. Tell us stuff that people don't know about you. Go back and give us some of your history, because I thought, well, we talk about the Dallas politics. So I'll get to that. I'll get to that right at the very end. But let me just start back where Ed Oakley was born and raised in Davis, Oklahoma. Many of you may know where that is. That's Turner Falls, for those that have been from here up there. My dad had a business on Main Street. About 5 generations of Oakleys and family, and my brothers and his kids still live there. There's about 6 generations went to high school there, so we're still there. I didn't go far. I went to school at Oklahoma State University and ended up at Sam Houston State University and graduated with a degree. Went to Oklahoma City for a while. And Frank Caven, one of those life-changing events in my life, offered me a job. He called me out of the blue, and I knew of him because I had a friend that was working for him. And he said, would you like to go to Houston and finish a nightclub? I understand you're good at that. And I had never built a nightclub. My friend had built me up, said I could do anything, and I was pretty handy with I was handy with construction. I was handy with plumbing, electrical, and all that, but I'd never taken on that endeavor. He said, well, you get on a plane, fly to Houston, and I built heaven in Houston. And Frank was one of these people in the history of this community that someone needs to talk about at some point, because he had the vision that you see here today on Cedar Springs that started back in the 70s. He said, I have been building clubs for a number of years, and he said, I've never finished one on time, and I'd never finished one on a budget. And he said, you did both of those, you got a job if you want to come back to Dallas. So he hired me for $500 a week, and that was in 1984 or something like that. Moved back here. I spent I'm still doing their work. I've actually never been an employee of Caven. I've had Oakley Construction, so I've managed their assets. I went from fixing toilets to running for mayor, and that's the God's truth. Now I'm back to fixing toilets, so it goes full circle. So when y'all break those, I still have to come in and take care of them. Really, I do. I have been part of an organization that changed my life, because this is a gay-owned and gay-operated company when I started, and still is. It is now an employee-owned company The employees of this company own it. That was set in motion about 15 years ago. And it allowed me to be who I was. I didn't have to hide being gay because I was working for a gay company. By the way, I came out when I was a senior in college, and that was down in Sam Houston in Huntsville. Found this, some of you may remember the farmhouse in Houston. Anyone remember that? Big disco, and boy, did I find that was a home, because I loved to dance, and that was, of course, I was thin and cute, and look at George was too when he was, in 1920 what? And by the way, I have listened to every one of the outrageous oral the tapings. They made me laugh, and they made me cry. There's some really interesting stories in there that you don't, as Paula Harvey would say, the rest of the story. You knew about the things that were going on in our community in the 70s and the 80s and the raids and all those things, but you don't know how we got past that and the people that were involved, and there are people that are involved today. Those people, I stood on their shoulders at some point along the way to the next level. And there's people that go back to the 60s and the 70s and the 80s that helped this community along. And I met a young man tonight who said, well, why are you speaking tonight? He said, I'm new to town and I don't know who you are. And that's the problem with our young people. They don't know how we got where we are today. And I would recommend that you go and listen to every one of those. I listened to Candy Markham and Kay Wilkinson and Steve Atkinson and Valletta Lil and George and Jack. And who knew that George ran around and Jack ran around downtown looking for sailors? I mean, I didn't know that about them, and I've known them for a long time. So the opportunity that this company afforded me to be able to basically get involved in politics. And you say, well, how did that happen? How did you go in from taking care of the maintenance for this club to getting involved in politics? And I will tell you, Mark Schechter would remember this. It was a zoning case, PD 193. And it was in the 1990s, and Lori Palmer and the Oakley Committee were going to change some rules that we weren't aware of. And the nightclubs were here, and we felt threatened. And I got involved, joined the Oakley Committee. Mark and I have served both as a leadership role on that at City Hall. And I found something I really liked, and that was zoning and land use. And everybody goes, yawn, that's really boring stuff. But let me tell you something. Never buy a house unless you know what the zoning is and what's allowed. And most people never look at that. And your realtors, George and Jack, will never tell you that. But you should always look at what the zoning is, because I will tell you, that'll affect your life. I got involved I literally spent a year going to City Hall, going to the Board of Adjustment, Plan Commission, and those sorts of things, because I was like a sponge. I soaked it up. Got to know many of the staff, such as Barbara Rosenberg, who was in the city attorney's office, and John Rogers, and many people that helped educate me. And I thought, you grow up in a small town and you think that politics is taking care of itself. My dad knew his Carl Albert, who was the Speaker of the House back then. He knew his congressman. He knew if he needed something, he could pick up the phone. And I thought people were taking care of us. And all along the way, things were happening in this community that I was kind of oblivious to. The lawsuits and the discrimination and the things that were happening to us as a society and as individuals. And the part of listening to the outrageous oral, I learned the rest of the story that I didn't know all of. But I come along in 1993, and this is one of those glass ceilings. Craig McDaniels was running for city council. Yes, Chris Luna, all at the same time. And Craig McDaniels broke that glass ceiling. It was one of those ceilings that, well, are we going to have an open... There have been openly gay individuals that ran. Was it Terry or Nelson? Bill Nelson ran for a couple of times and never almost made it, didn't quite make it. Craig broke that glass ceiling. And then Chris Luna, who came out after he was elected, also were two openly gay individuals that served on the council. And subsequently, John Loza was elected. Now, my situation was a little bit different. I was in Oak Cliff. I was in what was considered an African-American district. And I'm sorry? Yes, well, I was a little further south. I was down by Kimball High School. But I decided to run, and there were some people thought I had a lot of audacity as a white male and gay running for city council in an Oak Cliff seat. Well, I ran against Dwayne Caraway, run that election. Pat Gamble and several other people that I saw here earlier helped me with my campaign. Jeff Strader came along. If I go to mention names, I'll make some people upset with me. Won that election, and what it did was change people's perception that an openly gay didn't have to live in Oak Lawn to be elected for the city council. I got to serve with some of the best council members there. Valletta Lil was there. I got elected with, at the same time with Dr. Garcia. Lois Finkelman and I were really good friends. Talk about the non-discrimination ordinance. Those women were the ones that helped get that done. And it wasn't that a couple of gay guys on the council, John and I, could get it done. They took the task of helping us write it, along with the city manager, Mary Soom. She was assistant city manager at the time, and Madeline Johnson, who was the attorney. Laura Miller came along, and yes, give a big round of applause for Laura Miller. She wasn't in office more than a couple of months, and the ordinance was ready, and she said, Mary, get it on the agenda, and I want to pass it while the first 90 days I'm in office. She made that happen, and I would love for Valletta and Lois and I to come back and talk about what it took to get that done if you have, and Steve Atkinson and some of the C.C. Cox that helped us get that done, because it's a story in itself. I move on. I was elected to the city council in District 6. Then, as a junior council member, they decided they were really pissed off at me. So they drew me into Laura Miller's district. And I was either faced running against her. If she didn't run again, she subsequently chose to run for mayor. But everyone thought I was going to be a one-term council person. And by putting me in that district, they thought that would be end of me. So for 2 years, I was kind of the underdog. It was kind of a struggle. But we persevered, ran against another candidate I was now in District 3, Mark Housewright. No one that hadn't lived in North Oak Cliff had ever won the city council seat for that area. It hadn't lived in Kessler. I didn't live in Kessler. Well, I beat the Kessler person, Mark Housewright, took that seat. So suddenly, I was a proven asset. People knew that I would work hard and I'd get elected just like Lupe. We worked to prove ourselves. I remember the day I walked into city council after the runoff. They were having a briefing, and they stopped to move the chairs around, and Don Hill looked up, and all the African Americans on the council during that election in 2001 did a photo op saying, well, this is an African American seat and this guy doesn't need to be in this seat. Now I'm serving with those people, just like Lupe. The deer in the headlights when I walked in the room because I'd won the runoff. Don Hill started to shake my hand. I walked around the table. I grabbed him. I gave him a big bear hug, and he told me later, he said, I really didn't know what to expect. He said, I really thought you were going to come punch me out. And he and Elva and I became very good teammates on the council, got a lot of things accomplished. Very quickly, the mayor's race. Interesting dynamic. Everyone knew that Ed Oakley had run gay. I'd never hidden any of that asset, any of that fact. It was in the paper, but nobody talked about it. It wasn't until the runoff that on the front page of the Dallas Morning News, above the fold, aren't we a cool city that an openly gay candidate can get in the runoff for mayor? And suddenly everybody in Dallas is going, oh, Marge, did you know he was gay? He's been our council person for 6 years. I didn't know he was gay. Did you know that? Suddenly it became the topic. That's when the tide turned on the mayor's race. There was a Time magazine did an article, Lavender, Texas. All the gays taking over politics in Dallas. Lupe had gotten elected, and Gary Fitzsimmons had gotten elected. Jim Foster had gotten elected, and Ed Oakley was going to be mayor. And they chased us down, did a story, which was not a very good story, written by a gay person freelance writer from Arkansas, who thought it was a cool thing that he was going to get published in Time magazine. He came to this community, and we told him he would destroy a $2 million campaign if he proceeded to write this story. The other things that happened on Election Day, those that were paying attention, the other camp swears they didn't have anything to do with it, was a robocall that went out to a very select across-the-board from every council district. There are three important things in this election: crime, schools, and homosexuality. And within 5 minutes of the first call, I got a phone call, and within 10 minutes, the other camp had put out a disclaimer they had nothing to do with it. And so that was kind of another glass ceiling, because once it's done, you cannot do it again and win. And that glass ceiling was broken, I believe, to help the mayor of Houston, who is still mayor. What's her name? Help me. Anise Parker, who has now gone on to prove that we in a leadership role can lead a city like Houston. I would have loved to have been mayor. It would have been a lot of fun. We would have had a lot more fun than where we are today, I think. But there were people that were afraid we were going to turn this into San Francisco, because suddenly, oh God, I didn't know that Ed Oakley was gay. What was also interesting is the people that knew didn't care. The Citizens Council was split down the middle. People like the Ray Hunt family, Harlan Crow family. Actually, I was told by the Crow family I was the only candidate in the history that both sides of the family have supported in an election, because there are Democrats and Republicans. And I had both the conservative, and I had Lucy Billingsley, and her husband, who typically lean toward more liberal candidates. But it was a lot of fun. We had a lot of great people working on the campaign. Human Rights Campaign Fund came down. Victory Fund came down and worked. It was such a whirlwind, I hardly remember. But what's interesting about this community is we break these glass ceilings, and someone will be mayor of Dallas that will be openly gay. And I'm proud to have played a role and stood on the shoulders of Chris Luna and Craig McDaniels and John Loza and reached out and broke that glass ceiling for the next person. And I'll end with one more little story, and that is I also got to serve on the council with a number of my plan commissioners, and one of my really good friends was elected. Bill Blades was elected to the city council, and he was what I called my conservative, Baptist, Republican friend. He stood up in my fundraiser of about 50 conservative individuals in this town, and he said, I am supporting this person. He is the best candidate for this race. He's gay, and so what? And that's what he told by these group of people. We raised $2 million for that campaign. We matched Tom Leppert dollar for dollar, except for the $1 million he took out of his pocket and put into the race to stay on TV. And I told this story more than once, and one of the honors in this community that I received, thanks to Lori Masters and the women at the time, was another Jack and George Award, the Uncommon Legacy. And I told that story and took them to that banquet, he and his wife Sarah. And I said, if I, as a person in a leadership role being thrust there, if you can change people's mind like Bill and Sarah, one person at a time, we win.